Hi BookTube, and welcome to another fiction review. Today we are looking at another forgotten author, right? In spite his having published over 100 books in his lifetime. And many of these were early examples of some of the best-selling genres today: crime, suspense, thriller. Yeah, he had a pacey style, and he sold enough books to buy himself not only his first home in Leicester, but a second villa in the south of France, a private yacht, all that stuff. He sometimes wrote under the pen name Anthony Partridge, but mainly he was known by his double-barreled surname. 34 film adaptations were made from his works in the 1920s and 1930s, and I wonder how many people, nevertheless, will be just like me, wondering who on earth is this? Today we are reviewing The Terrible Hobby of Sir Joseph Londe, Baronet, by E. Philiips Oppenheim, published in 1924, no ISBN numbers in those days, 287 pages. I'd love to remark on those 287 pages because I've never read through a book so quickly. There's something about the way this man writes, and I will talk about that later on. But just suffice it to say, don't pay too much attention to the number of pages, because I think if you're anything like I am, it will be a book that will feel much, much shorter. Now, getting a hold of a copy is interesting. In the UK, amazingly, you can get a Kindle copy. Some kind soul must have just typed out the whole manuscript, and that's selling for £1.49. In print in the UK and in the US varies. In the UK, I couldn't find anything cheaper than £39. I think that's because this book has been out of print for so long that all the copies are vintage and valuable in one way or another. The cheapest I found online was about £10. So that's not too bad. And I found mine. What did I pay for mine? I bought it at Hay on Wine. I think I only paid £5. So that's not too bad. I managed quite well there. But there's no need to buy Philiips Oppenheim books because most of them are now in the public domain. And my description box has 2 links where you can find free online copies of The Terrible Hobby of Sir Joseph Londe. My copy may actually be a 1924 edition. There are no publication dates printed anywhere in the book, but when I compare the Wikipedia bibliography of all books written by Philipp Oppenheim, and then I look at the inside cover of my copy, which has a notice from the publishers about other books from the author which are available, I can't find a single title listed by the publishers that actually came out after 1924. And there's also a personal annotation. Can I show you that? This is my copy. You can see it is a little worse for wear against the binding there, but you know how much I love these old beat-up books. But on the inside cover, you can see inscribed in there, and it says Lillian J. Wood, who lived in Lowestoft, which is on the south coast of England. But I do think this may be a 1924 copy, so I'll be hanging on to it. Now we need to meet the author properly. Edward Philiips Oppenheim was born in 1866 in Leicester. Now, he was born to a father who had a very big leather business in the area. He had to withdraw from grammar school when he was only 16 in order to work in that business. And then later on, he married an American, Elise Clara Hopkins, and maybe that helped because his writing was so popular on both sides of the Atlantic that he appeared on the cover of Time magazine on the 12th of September, 1927. And his first publication came out when he was barely in his 20s, Expiation. And his last work was in 1943, 3 years before his death, Mr. Miracle. And after his death in 1946, the New York Times wrote this about him. It said, as he recalls in his pleasant and modest autobiography, all his books were easy to write. They were equally easy to read, especially on a summer vacation when escapist literature is most welcome. He composed by dictating to a secretary and once produced 7 works in a single year. His social set included the characters that populated his novels, where he created, quote, a glamorous world of international intrigue, romance, and plushy society galloping along in swift action and suspense. I think that's a perfect description of the kind of writing that I found in this book. Now let's get to the meat of these lovely books. Setting. Let's talk about that first. As this book is tracking a suspect on the run, the setting changes regularly, but our protagonists, they come and go from a little cramped office in Shaftesbury Avenue, London. Don't expect a lot of attention to be paid to the surroundings unless some point of description has a bearing on the action later. You're going to follow the characters to Salisbury Plain in Wiltshire. You're going to follow them to Monte Carlo. You're going to go to the coast of Spain in Algeciras, right? But you're not going to be given more than fleeting impressions about those places. So you'll know that Wiltshire is underpopulated countryside. You'll know that Monte Carlo has luxurious properties and casinos, and you'll know that Algeciras has cliffs overlooking its beaches. But after that, the novel leaves you to fill in all the visual details. In terms of time, we are contemporary with the publication year, 1924. So we're not far after the First World War, when the mental health consequences for men who had witnessed the horrors of that conflict were affecting them and affecting their families. So allowances must be made in this kind of a thriller novel for the technology that simply did not exist and the forensic knowledge that did not exist. So there's a villain with an illness and a secret weapon that you might find hard to credit now. But in 1924, there was no reason to believe that those things were not possible. The narrative viewpoint is designed for flattery. It is third-person omniscient, and what it does is it makes the reader smarter than the criminal, smarter than those who are trying to catch the criminal. And also, it takes away any burden of trying to remember lots of clues dropped in throughout the text, or trying to make sense of all those clues as you are reading. This, I think, is one of the qualities that make this book a very undemanding read. This is the book you would turn to if you were tired or stressed, or you know your reading is going to get interrupted a lot. The number of characters isn't very great. There are 8 principal characters. Now, 2 of these keep changing identity throughout the book, but the reader is never expected to work out for themselves whether they're dealing with a disguised version of an earlier character. No, there are enough hints. Maybe for some people, there might be a few too many hints. But you see, you could even put this book down for a couple of days and pick it up again, and the text would help you remember where you were, and you'll still be better informed than most of the characters. And mobility, there is mobility, right? The book takes you to a new location every few chapters. But what you won't get is a lot of writing about the process of moving to those places. I think this is one of those techniques which gives Philiips Oppenheim the pace of his work. The characters talk about driving cars, about booking taxis, about getting on trains and boats, but as you read it, it really feels as if the characters just have that Star Trek-like ability to beam into new locations instantly, so that you, the reader, don't have to wait very long for the next exciting thing to happen. In terms of representation, there's a naivety to some of the characters that you're either going to find charming or mildly irritating. Daniel Rock and Anne Lancaster, there are plucky investigators who are hunting the master criminal, and they've got no lack of enthusiasm, but they could use a bit more sophistication. When planning their next move or carrying out their plans. The villain has this diabolical genius that can anticipate in detail what might go wrong and have steps in place to combat. One feels that he must have a gift for telepathy or foreseeing the future a little bit. Some people can happily accept that. Some people can stretch the boundaries of reality to that degree, and others might find it irritating. And I imagine you probably already know which category describes you as a reader. A critic once said of Philiips Oppenheim that he populated his books with people from his social set. We saw that in the New York Times. Wealthy and titled and inclined to be suspicious of social change or outsiders. Apparently there are a lot of villains in Philip Oppenheimer novels who turn out to be communists or anarchists, right? So appealing to the fears of the day. And yet this isn't the case with The Terrible Hobby of Sir Joseph Londe, Baronet. Our villain has no political motive, and he moves easily in sophisticated society. He does not meet his end at the hands of the two investigators, and I find that interesting. Daniel Rock and Anne Lancaster don't capture their man. And if anything, the resolution of this novel seemed to be championing the actions of ordinary people defending themselves against evil. Problematic content. In 1924, most problematic subjects simply did not appear in popular novels, or else they were referred to very indirectly so that the readers were spared the worst details. I mean, there is threat of violence in this book and reference to people being the victims of crime, but no details, no witnessing of the violence happening. The phrase making love appears in the book, but you must not misunderstand it. In 1924, the phrase making love simply meant almost flirting with the opposite sex in the hope that they would become attracted to you, but nothing further than that. The characters use profanity, yes, but the words are tame by contemporary standards. The devil is frequently invoked, right? What the devil is that? Who the devil does he think he is? That's probably the worst it gets. For my rabbit hole, it was interesting to see the subject of mental illness handled in this book, particularly mental illness that had been caused by combat experience. I had thought that this soon after the First World War, that subject would be a complete taboo. Now, don't misunderstand, there's still a long way to go in terms of really grasping what mental illness meant. For example, all the good male characters in this novel, they have an almost unbelievable level of emotional detachment, no matter what is happening around them. And this quiet, uninterrupted assurance about themselves, about what they say and what they decide and what they do. They don't ever get very down. Whereas by contrast, it's only the villain who is impassioned, who feels things deeply. It's only the villain who has moments of self-doubt and times when he needs to go away and reflect and wonder about himself. And of course, then there's all his ideas about what he's capable of and what he can and can't do morally. And all these things together are all lumped as part of his madness. So what you get is this kind of either or dictum for any man. And I think that there's a focus here on the men in the book because there are more male characters than female. Either you as a man are completely unaffected by what happened to you during the Great War, or you must be losing your grasp on sanity. There was no finer grained look at things than that, okay? So maybe other writers portrayed greater complexity of reactions in their characters, but the sad thing is that what popular literature was doing at the time was reinforcing some very unhelpful ideas from men who were not well as a result of what they'd experienced in the trenches. And it held back men from seeing their post-combat issues as normal, not evidence of some kind of unusual weakness of mind, but an understandable response to such high levels of stress over a long period of time. Nevertheless, I really feel the book is a lovely, entertaining read, and I can't close off this review without giving you a little taste here from page 47. Miss Anne Lancaster, seated at one of the small balcony tables upstairs at Imano's, looking quite at her best, and with a great bunch of violets by the side of her plate, tried to persuade herself that she was enjoying her dinner. Her companion was, in his way, sufficiently good-looking, and was certainly attentive. The dinner was the best the place could afford. A gold-topped bottle reposed in ice by their side, and an excellent little orchestra was discoursing soft and pleasant music. Most of the concomitants of a pleasant evening were there, yet a queer feeling had come to Anne. Every now and then her companion leaned across the table towards her to whisper words of admiration. Each time she smiled back at him, but each time it became more difficult. Whenever he dropped his voice, she felt inclined to shriek, and he dropped it more and more often as the dinner drew to a close. Whilst they were waiting for their coffee, he moved his chair and leaned across until their heads nearly touched. "Anne," he began. "I have not given you permission to call me Anne," she interrupted. You soon will, he continued, very soon indeed, I hope, after you have heard what I have to say. First of all, I will make a confession. I have spoken to you 3 or 4 times of my uncle. He is not my uncle at all. You mean the rich old misanthrope who wants my hair? Anne demanded. He nodded. I think that he is a little mad, he confided. I will tell you the truth about the matter. He has a wife whom no one ever sees, whose hair he believes to be perfectly white, although, as a matter of fact, it is exactly the same color as your own. She had a shock some years ago. All the while, he is looking for someone with exactly your colored hair. He is a clever man, a scientist, they say, but he is mad. He thinks that he will be able to graft the hair onto his wife's head, and that when she sees her hair the right color again, she will recover her health and spirits. What an extraordinary story, Anne murmured. It is true. I give you my word that it is true, the young man assured her earnestly. And that's the review done. If you do happen to see a title by E. Philiips Oppenheim anywhere in secondhand bookstores and you fancy a relaxing, fun little read from a time long gone, then I recommend picking up one of his books. As I said, in my description box, there will be links to 2 sites, to Project Gutenberg Australia and also The Faded Page. Both of these have online free copies of The Terrible Hobby of Sir Joseph Londe. So if you're intrigued and want to read that story, there it is available for you online. Right, everybody, I'm going to carry on. We're doing a lot of filming today to get a lot of stuff backed up because I'm anticipating December will be busy, so I'm preparing myself accordingly. I hope that your November and December go well, in spite of all the busyness that might be part of your life because of holidays and so on. And I look forward to seeing everybody again in a few days' time. Take care. Bye-bye.